Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelade. Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Greville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen. Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Southern. Madame le député... sorry. Madame le député Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Tadier. Monsieur le député Luce.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublé. Monsieur le député Morel. Madame le député Lehegara. Monsieur le député Ayer. Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves.
Présente.
Madame le député Gardner. Monsieur le député Gorst. Monsieur le député Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le député Moore. Monsieur le député Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Joseph. Monsieur le député Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Coles.
Présent.
Madame le député Poré. Monsieur le député War.
Présent.
Madame le député Miles.
Présente.
Madame le député Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le député Curtis. Madame le député Faltham. Madame le député Binet.
Présente.
Madame le député Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le député Miller.
Présente.
Madame le député Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Binet. Monsieur le député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le député Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Curtis. Madame le député Ward.
Présente.
Madame le député Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le député Stevenson. Monsieur le député Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi les gouvernements et les puissances de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qui de plus te commettre à leurs soins. Quand nous t'en prions au nom et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi est la règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelade.
So the Connétable of St. Brelades is still out of the island attending the APF conference.
State's business.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Malade.
Je jure que Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le député Tadier.
As Deputy Tadier is State's business with the APF.
State's business.
Madame le député Dublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel,
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Gardner,
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Gorst,
Sir, Deputy Gorst is out of the island on States business. He's in the UK meeting ambassadors and parliamentarians.
States business.
Madame le Deputy Moore,
States business, so French Parliamentary Association. Even. Thank you.
Monsieur le Deputy Joseph,
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Feltham.
Malade.
Juré que Madame le Deputy Feltham est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux audiences sans exposer sa santé. Madame le Deputy Stevenson.
Used on parental duties. Les États sont constitués. Before we move to the in-committee debate, Deputy Morel, I see your light is on.
Thank you, sir. It was just to ask leave of the Assembly that, given events of the last 24 hours, I would like to revisit my offer to make a statement to the Assembly on the ferry service contract, and I would be happy to do so after the in-committee debate, if they are happy to give me leave to do so, sir.
Yes, I mean, obviously, technically, notice should have been given by 5 p.m. yesterday for a ministerial statement. But it seems to me that it's a matter for members, and if they are content to let you give a statement with the usual 15 minutes of questioning following from that, then we can easily fix that at the end of the in-committee debate. There appears to be a lot of nodding going on, so I'm going to take that as a general acceptance, and yes, we will schedule that for the... So will that be circulated moderately quickly, Deputy?
I have to write that statement, sir, but I will get it to the Assembly as quickly as possible, sir.
Right. Well, if we could get that done as quickly as possible, that would be excellent.
So the States weren't sitting when my phone rang when I came in, so I think I should declare an out-of-order charge to the Greffiers Fund.
Well, thank you for that. I was going to mention the musical interlude that we had during roll call. Technically, I suppose, until I say les États sont constitués, the states are not actually sitting, but I would nonetheless, in case people take that as carte blanche to do what they like until I say those words, the standing orders apply from the moment I come into the room and sit down. So, or at least stand up and say to vote the roll call. But thank you very much, Deputy. And
that's a new ruling, sir.
Yes, it is. It's a new ruling. Just in case, now you've raised when does the state sitting start, as far as I'm concerned, for the purposes of standing orders and discipline, it starts as soon as the bailiff enters. Very well. We now move on to the in-committee debate. Before we start, I think the Chair of PPC would wish to say something. Is that correct, Connie?
Yes, thank you, sir. Members will be aware that there's been some disquiet expressed by the petitioner and other signatories of this petition regarding the manner in which this matter will be debated today. This was echoed by members in this chamber when we were determining the date for this debate to take place, and I wish to reiterate that the debate in the Assembly today is exactly what is promised as part of the petition process. It is an in-committee debate. This debate will be in public, as opposed to in camera, which takes place in private. And the rules are that members can speak as many times as they wish, but there is no vote taken at the end. This Assembly and PPC has recognised that this may not be quite what was expected by those who signed the petition, and consequently my committee, which is PPC, is undertaking a review of the petitions process and will be bringing forward amendments to ensure that the system in future is more in tune with the public's desires. I hope that this in-committee debate will provide a valuable insight into members' thinking on this issue and give an indication as to how much support there would be if a proposition was to come before the Assembly. It remains open to any member of this Assembly to lodge such a proposition for future debate, should they see fit. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Connétable. Very well. As the Connétable has foreshadowed, we now move into an in-committee debate. That means that the usual rules applicable in standing orders apply in all respects, other than the fact that there is no vote taken at the end and members can speak more than once. When I'm selecting members to speak, I will give priority to those who have not yet spoken, but then after that, I will call people in the order that they put their light on and I see them in the usual way. The norm, I think, is that the matter is proposed, or at least spoken to first, by someone who is supportive, and that person has been identified as Deputy Barbara Ward, and then the Minister for Treasury and Resources will speak after that, and thereafter the debate will open. Traditionally, Deputy Ward is allowed then at the end to speak for a mopping up exercise, as it were, bringing things into parentheses, but we shall deal with that as it comes. I've allowed half a day, which means that the hard deadline, subject to any resolution the states might want to bring, is 12:45. Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. I just wondered, if this is an in-committee debate, if any of us are in receipt of a pension, should we declare it?
Well,
thank you.
The short answer is no, simply because, well, there's a number of different reasons. The answer is you can declare it, of course, but there is no vote to be taken. Absolutely nothing will change as a result of what the states say today. That requires a proposition to be brought in the future and the states to vote upon it in the usual way. And in any event, it would be an interest shared by a vast number in society in any event. I've used that phrase twice, in any event, so I shall stop using it now.
So, and the interest is actually taxation, of course, and which will be coming on to the budget. And
yes.
So it's actually an impact of whether or not we are higher paid tax or lower paid taxes if we were to receive a pension, which I don't, but I will do.
Yes. Well, there we are. I'm at that age, so, but I don't think I have to disqualify myself from presiding over an in-committee debate on the matter. Yes, well, all of that said, then, we will open the in-committee debate. Deputy Ward.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm pleased, as we as an Assembly are here to debate this topic following the result of the online petition brought by Mr Paul Troliak, where some 5,280 people voted. If there had been an opportunity for islanders who were unable to vote online, I know that Cunitard's Shenton Stone has looked at this particular issue, because we would like people could have actually voted at the parish halls, and I'm sure that the number would have been much greater if that facility had actually been available. Sir, a 5,280 online petition votes, in my view, is a significant number out of some 85,000 adult residents in Jersey. That's people over the age of 18. And that equates to some 6.2% of the population. And that's something we can't ignore. I would ask if we could consider, when petitions reach 5,000 plus, that this be considered as a people's proposition, which can be debated and voted on, likened to a states member lodging a proposition. I'm unsure, sir, of the process or which standing order needs to be changed or added to, but please may I ask if either both or either the Policy and Procedures Committee and the States GREF could consider this change if it is the wish of the Assembly. Today's online petition identifies two areas. One, the issue of double taxation, in which persons in Jersey pay tax on their social security contributions on the one hand, and eventually pay tax again as an old age pensioner when they receive their OAP. And the two, the situation whereby pensioners are paying a rate of 26% on the net income after deduction of the statutory allowances. This is higher than the accepted rate, which we all believe is 20%. Members will be aware that throughout our working lives, we are obliged to pay social security contributions, which is taxed from our taxable gross income before transfer into the social security fund to cover many benefits. For example, income support, carer's allowance, parental maternity leave benefits, etc. could go on, which interestingly, when applied and paid to the recipient, is a tax-free benefit. However, when the OAP pension, based on the number of years' contributions, is also a benefit paid, but is taxable if it's over the threshold. Why is this Social Security benefit taxable for a second time and treated differently to other Social Security benefits? The reason why I'm saying that it's a benefit is because if somebody is applying for a carer's allowance, they are not allowed to get their old age pension and a carer's allowance because they're both benefits. And they can't do that under the Social Security law. So it's an interesting thought. We're advised that the Social Security payment during our working lives is technically a Jersey global payment into the system. It's not exclusively paid into a person's OAP pension pot. So I'm asking, if Social Security benefits are tax-free, then why isn't the OAP treated equitably? Or at least that a proportion of the OAP has the double taxation element removed. This is unlike, the OAP pension is unlike what persons that make contributions into a private pension scheme, who receive tax incentives on paying it and whose contributions are tax deductible. When these persons eventually achieve retirement age, their pensions are then taxed. This is termed deferred taxation. No double taxation exists here at all, sir. But what is interesting is if you're on your OAP pension and in receipt of a small works pension, but you're under the threshold, you're then getting no tax on whether you've paid your OAP pension or even your private pension. So actually you're getting double no taxation on a private pension. It's just interesting. I know the Treasury Minister's shaking her head, but if you're under the threshold, you wouldn't be paying tax. So, members have learnt that the tax rate on gross and net income is not 20%, as we're all led to believe. Remember the 20 means 20? Only single persons earning above £90,000 a year and a married couple earning above £132,000 a year in our society pay 20%, with no allowances. Some 10% of taxpayers. The remainder, working and retired, people pay 26% tax on the net income under the marginal relief calculation, where married or single person's allowance, etc. are applied. I was surprised to note this is applicable to some 90% of tax-paying islanders who are paying this 26% rate of income tax. One may wonder, why is this the case? Which I have to say, I still do, despite the very helpful advice from the Taxation Office. I still remain quite confused. We are advised that Jersey income tax is 20% and no one pays 26% income tax. If this is so, then why is it stated on our tax forms, calculated under two regimes, one at standard rate of 20%, and then at 26% under the marginal relief? I and many others would like to see a review and make things simpler and have allowances applied. For example, one's personal allowance applied to all, regardless of income, and have the 20% tax applied. The removal of double taxation on old age pensions will reward those that have worked hard all their lives, paid their dues and just want a comfortable retirement. Social Security OAP pension is the bedrock payment for all. To note this change would be applicable to the 10,000 out of the approximate 32,000 people who are in receipt of an OAP pension. Of the 32,000, 12,000 live abroad, who would not be affected by any of the changes if it was ever agreed here. Of the remaining 20,000, some 50% pay zero tax as they are below the earnings threshold. This means that only 10,000 will ultimately benefit if this came in, so majority being the middle income. We need to be mindful that not all of the 10,000 who could benefit would not be receiving a full old age pension. which the figures we have been given are based on. Of course, there will be a cost. For every change, there is a cost. But there are only other fairer and more equitable ways of doing this without squeezing pensioners. If I may suggest that consideration be given to some solutions to this situation. 1. We are aware of the ageing population and the decline of younger persons to sustain our workforce. May we consider some form of financial encouragement for the younger, older person, someone who's aged 60, 65 plus, to take on employment following their retirement, if fit and able to do so, of course. At present, full tax is applied on all income, OAP and other pensions, which is a disincentive to seek other small type of employment. Tax-wise, it just doesn't make sense. The younger, older person has many skills and experience still left to assist in filling the gaps in our community at all different levels. Let's consider some tax incentive. 2, consider reducing the taxation on old age pensions, again as an incentive for all. I'm aware that some will say, why should we reduce a tax on OAPs when the individual may have other private pensions payable? In my view, a private pension payable can be lost as it is reliant on the company's ability to pay, so are not as secure as our government social security pension fund, which is well funded and protected in legislation. The Jersey OAP, as I have stated previously, is the bedrock payment for all islanders, and it's time we supported our old age pensions by providing it to be tax-free or even some part-way percentage tax-free element. 3, may I ask the Treasury Minister and the Controller of Revenue to remove that confusing, unexplained tax rate of 26% on net income and restore with a normal tax rate of 20% with all the allowances restored, which we can make this system much clearer. Sir and members, as I've said before, we need to listen to islanders and have their voices heard. I look forward to hearing 2 other members' views on this topic. Thank you, sir, and members for listening. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy. Deputy Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we are debating today whether to exempt one specific type of income from the scope of income tax as a result of a petition that gathered over 5,000 signatures. One might expect that if we went to the public as a whole and said, would you like to pay less tax? Very, very many people would say, yes, I would like to pay more tax. So the fact that pensioners are saying they should pay less tax, they are no different from anyone else. I understand the concerns of those who signed the petition, particularly among pensioners who feel that, having paid tax and contributions throughout their working lives, have done their bit. In response to the petition, in my response to the petition, which was published some time ago, I set out my reasons for opposing this exemption. Those who read my response will, I hope, understand that a new income tax exemption is not the right way for government to support pensioners who need additional financial support. While affordability of such an exemption is clearly a concern, it is not the primary issue. Age discrimination has no place in our tax system, and there are broader reasons why this proposal is unwise. We have already taken steps to remove age discrimination in our tax system by removing the age-related allowances some time ago. We are also currently taking steps to remove gender and age-based discrimination with our move to independent taxation. The basic principle of tax policy is that it should be blind to a person's personal characteristics and should focus only on their income. So let me discuss the issues why this is a difficult proposal to accept. Firstly, I want to talk about the very real threat to our long-term financial stability if we were to exempt the old age pension from tax. The Assembly has previously debated the risks we face from a declining working age population and a growing number of pensioners and the pressures that entails, both in terms of diminishing tax revenues and increasing health and other social costs. We have all seen the graphs showing that we are looking towards having a much greater proportion of older people than younger people in the future. Granting further tax cuts to pensioners would have a significant and increasing impact over time, likely necessitating immediate tax rises elsewhere, with further increases required in future to cover the escalating costs of this exemption. It is also important to note that a pensioner who is only in receipt of the old age pension does not pay tax as their total income is below the threshold. Our threshold is currently £20,000 and will, if our budget for 2025 is accepted by the Assembly, will increase to £20,700. We are not aware of any close jurisdiction which has tax allowances as generous as our own. The tax cuts proposed would only benefit those pensioners whose total income exceed the threshold, indicating that they are in receipt of additional income other than the old age pension. The long-term fiscal outlook already indicates a substantial challenge, and this exemption would only intensify that challenge. We estimate that around half of pensioners currently pay no income tax, but the 50% of pensioners that do often have substantial incomes, and those incomes are not just from private pensions. They may be numerous forms of income, from investment, from rental. It's not just private pensions that are at issue. And it is fair that those with significant incomes contribute proportionately to society's costs. To give this group a tax benefit exceeding £20 million would be unjustifiable and unfair to others. To give an example, pensioners who have a substantial income of, say, £75,000 would pay £14,300 of tax under the current system. If the old age pension was made exempt from tax, that person's tax liability would decrease to £10,625, giving this taxpayer a saving of £3,675. The pensioner who receives only a moderate amount of income at £20,000 or slightly under would receive no benefit from exempting the old age pension, as they currently do not pay tax. Furthermore, this figure does not include the potential impact on the long-term care fund. Tax-paying pensioners do continue to pay long-term care contributions, nor does it take into account the impact on social security spending if, for example, a significant proportion of the 50% of tax-paying pensioners transition to non-tax-paying status and access additional benefits. In short, sir, if States members support this petition, we would create a legacy of longer-term fiscal instability. One of the major flaws of the proposal, if it was adopted and put into law, is that it is completely untargeted. Some of this island's wealthiest people would benefit from the exemption. If ministers were to bring forward a proposal like this, I am sure there would be many States members asking for a breakdown of those households that would benefit, and they would rightly question why we are choosing to spend more than £20 million in such an arbitrary way. Sir, I can only ask members to consider the position in the United Kingdom, where the current Labour government is facing considerable difficulty trying to withdraw the winter fuel payment from pensioners who can afford to pay it, making it means-tested. Our own winter bonus is means-tested, so that it goes only to pensioners who can afford it. This would be reversing that very well-considered approach to targeting spending where it is most needed. As I've said, Jersey has particularly high exemption thresholds for income tax. No individual resident in Jersey with an income below £20,000 pays any income tax. That threshold alone means that more than half of pensioners fall outside the income tax net. Consequently, the lowest income pensioners would see no benefit from this exemption, making it an ineffective way to spend over £20 million purely on tax income. So the petition itself does not discuss the 26% marginal relief. So no one in this island pays 26% on their total income. In any event, the rate of tax is not the rate of tax is not what we're discussing today. 26% is a relief, it's not a tax rate. And the fact that someone may pay, the 26% rate exists to prevent cliff edges where someone's income increases certain amounts. But nobody pays more than 20% on their total income. And if anybody does think they're paying more than 20% on their total income, then if they would like to bring their tax assessment, my team will very gladly review to see why that would appear to be the case. I agree with the Deputy, and the Comptroller has said recently that we are perhaps, in terms of the 26%, a victim of a move towards plain English, and that by trying to describe the 26% as a rate, we have confusing everybody. And I think we all accept that we need to do more work to explain to people where the 26% relief comes into play. But the fact that someone may pay 26% on a notional net income is not the same as paying 26% on total income. And that is not the case that anybody does that. Sir, the proposal also risks significant unfairness for non-pensioner households with similar incomes. For instance, if this proposition was accepted, we could end up with two households living next door to each other who have exactly the same income but facing drastically different tax bills. A household with a working family would in some cases pay thousands more in income tax compared to a pensioner household, even though they have the same level of income. My recent report to the States includes tables which illustrate this disparity. Nobody has yet provided a persuasive case to me for taxing families, often with higher outgoings, more heavily than other households with identical incomes. The petition's assumptions that contributions paid during working life equates directly to a retirement pension oversimplifies the purpose of contributions and pension funding. Payments into the Social Security Fund go towards providing a wide range of benefits for islanders, including the pension. It is essentially an insurance scheme. These benefits include short and long-term incapacity allowances, carers allowance, parental grants, and many other benefits. The Health Insurance Fund also receives allocations from Social Security contributions to subsidise GP visits and the cost of prescriptions. There could be many individuals who will benefit from those benefits throughout their working life, some many more than others, and will go on to receive their pension in addition. The petition wrongly implies that contributions are a form of retirement savings scheme. The money we pay throughout our working lives has not been kept to one side for our personal later enjoyment. It has been used during that period to support the overall well-being of islanders. Contributions are better viewed as insurance payments, ensuring the financial support that islanders at any point in their lives may require. Indeed, the founding principles of most social security schemes around the world is about providing insurance against inability to work. As I've just said, we as individuals do not pay into our own old age pension pot. Most of us pay around 6% contributions on our earnings up to a cap. But on its own, this would be wholly insufficient to fund a pension in later life. There are two other main sources of funding that pay for our pensions and benefits. Firstly, employers contribute into the fund in respect of their employees, and secondly, it is supplemented by the state's grant. The state's grant is effectively a subsidy for anyone earning less than the standards earning limit, which is a little over £65,000 in 2024. Without this grant, anyone earning below that figure, which are around 3/4 of islanders, would not be able to maintain the full contributions record which is needed to receive certain benefits, including the old age pension in full. There might not be a tax deduction available, but there is significant financial support available for most islanders during the working lives. So the government is supporting islanders. This support might be less visible than a tax deduction, but it is almost certainly more generous. In 2024, a median wage worker earning £44,200 will pay £2,652 in employee contributions, with the employer contributing £2,873. Additionally, the public purse contributes £1,272 through supplementation, making public support far more generous than a tax deduction of £690 would be. If one argues, I've paid tax on my contributions, so I shouldn't have to pay tax on the pension, it is essential to recognise that not only a proportion of the pension is funded by your own contributions, the rest of it is paid by the wider community through general taxation, and you will, of course, have been able to claim other benefits during your working life. And as I've said, some people will claim those benefits to a very greater degree than others. I think, sir, it's also worth simply recognising the ongoing challenge that very many jurisdictions are facing with the whole concept of pensions. When pensions were, I believe, invented in the post-war years, at that time, people were expected to live only 3 or 4 years post their retirement age. People are now living for decades following retirement, and the availability of pensions paid into people's not just early 70s, not just the 10, but into people's 80s and 90s is a challenge for pension schemes worldwide. We are happy in Jersey, our last actuarial reports show that our social security fund is very well funded and well able to pay pensions into the future, and we are in a very fortunate position in being able to do that. We are fortunate in Jersey with a strong social security fund, comparatively generous old age pensions, and higher tax thresholds than almost anywhere else. Balancing these advantages is challenging, particularly as global events have recently strained our resources, but we were able to weather those storms because our predecessors were cautious. Our fiscal resilience is a result of prudent planning. I believe we need to continue to protect those on lowest incomes, especially those who are already shielded by high personal tax allowances, and to safeguard our public finances for older generations. This proposal does neither of those things. And just to touch on a subject that I know is one close to the member's heart, as it is to many of us, I risk saying that looking round this assembly, I see several people who fall into the description of younger, older people. Our tax system has clearly, I count myself among them because I'm over 55 and that makes you an older person. Our tax system has clearly not stopped many of us from continuing to contribute to society and pay taxes, and but I'm sure we will bear those things in mind. Although we are not voting today, I hope that members would join me in rejecting this well-intentioned but impractical and hopelessly expensive proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Conor Thompson, second.
Thank you, sir. I will be brief. As someone else who's just over 55, last week, sir, I visited a school that's doing a breakfast club, and this seems to be the trend now. It's affecting all walks of life in Jersey, and those schools that are not running breakfast clubs are seriously thinking about it because children are going to school not adequately nourished. But at the other end of the scale, our senior citizens are starting to suffer quite badly. I was in my local supermarket, I think about 6 months ago, in a queue waiting to pay, and there was a senior citizen there, lady, put her card on the machine, came up, declined, so she tried again, declined, and obviously it was acutely embarrassing for the lady, so I took my card out, but there was a young man in front of me who had building clothes on, dabbed his card first. So I thought, well done, young man. So they are out there. Until recent times, I ran a charity called Winter Warmers, which was cutting, drying wood and supplying logs to senior citizens for winter fuel. I know the thought of my wielding a chainsaw fills the Constable of Grooville's heart with dread, but I managed to retain my digits. But I'm getting a bit old now for wheeling, carrying huge bags of wood around. But what happened was the people that I assisted were terrified, absolutely terrified of the red bill landing on their mat. So if they had a wood burner, they would open up all the internal doors of their homes, and the wood burner would just take the chill off the whole house. It didn't do much, but it helped a little. I would say, I'll be very brief, sir. I would say that I'm very grateful to Deputy Barbara Ward for bringing this forward, and should she bring forward a proposition to this extent, I would be happy to support it. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak? Honourable Grouville.
Thank you, sir. I too am only just over the age of 55, like my colleague to my right, sir. But when I was on the campaign trail, I had the pleasure of meeting a delightful lady in Gorey Village, who we spoke at great length about this topic. She was paying tax on her income, but she explained that income, and she had rental properties, she had private pensions. So inevitably, I explained that she would be over the threshold and she would pay tax. But we also discussed the possibility, and I have also discussed this with Deputy Miller, about private pensions. And my point to her and my point to the Deputy is, private pensions, we were all encouraged to take them out at one point. And I'm sure many people will remember that, because the financial future of anything and everything in the world was at risk at that time. So the public and the states and everyone was encouraged to take out private pensions. Now, a private pension is a contract between a private individual and a company providing that service. And my point to Deputy Miller at that time, who was head of Social Security, was that could we not have an opt-out clause, sir? An opt-out clause saying that any contributions to a private pension, a private arrangement, could be tax-free. And she quite rightly explained that when that pension was paid out, it would have an interest element or an investment element that would be supplementary to what the individual had paid in. However, it is a private arrangement between two private companies, as it were. So my point is, sir, that perhaps we should be considering an opt-out clause. I know our generation won't be able to benefit from this because we won't have had that opt-out clause at all. But later on, the next generation of private pension payees, as it were, would be able to benefit from this. So they would know at the end of that time, when they retired, that any contributions they put into a private pension would be then not taxable. They would have been taxed throughout their working life. Now that means that when you're retired and you're not able to earn perhaps the amounts that you could have done during your working life, you will have less tax to pay and therefore a greater income and greater security. And that is the point I'd like to raise, sir. I think we should have some sort of arrangement, and I would certainly support such an arrangement, where we would have an opt-out clause on private pensions. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition, or rather the in-committee debate? No other member wishes to speak. Deputy Mesick.
Thank you, sir. I'm standing to speak to represent Reform Jersey's position as a party on this petition and to speak in support of Jersey's pensioners. The first thing I want to say is thank you to the over 5,000 islanders who took the time to sign this petition. We should always welcome engagement from the public through these democratic channels. It is neither an inconvenience and certainly not intimidatory. It is democracy in action. And I'd like to personally thank the petitioner himself, who very kindly met with me to talk about the petition. So I think that the petition met this threshold is a sign of something deeper than just the words of that petition reveal. It's a sign that there is a feeling of grievance among islanders about the quality of life and support that we provide for pensioners. And Reform Jersey recognises and accepts this grievance. Jersey is a wealthy society, but all of the stats that show this also show that over the last decade we have become a more unequal society, where those on the highest incomes have seen their conditions improve immeasurably without being asked to pay any more, and the proportion of those living in relative low income has reached utterly unacceptable levels, and in many instances those people have been asked to shoulder the burden of government mistakes. When people look to their retirement, they expect that, having worked hard all of their lives, that awaiting them ought to be a period of enjoyment with respect and dignity. But for too many pensioners in Jersey, this is not the case. In the UK, 16% of pensioners live in relative low income after housing costs. In Jersey, it's 26%. A greater proportion of pensioners in Jersey live in relative low income than in the UK, a fact which I rarely hear recognised. And despite this, some previous governments made decisions that actively made things worse for pensioners. The 2014 to 2018 austerity government launched a cruel assault against Jersey's pensioners. They abolished the pensioners' enhanced tax allowance. Reform Jersey fought against this, but we lost. They changed the disregards rules used to calculate income support entitlement, which would have left some poorer pensioners potentially hundreds of pounds a year worse off. Again, we fought against that, but failed. They tried to abolish the provision of free TV licences for the over 75s, but they were defeated on that. They were defeated because of an amendment that sought to reallocate funding from the government communications budget to save that benefit. And save it did, and yet the communications budget still went up. Figure out that one. They tried to abolish the pensioners' Christmas bonus entirely, but we managed to partially defeat them, saving it as a means-tested offer instead, although it did end up being frozen for years afterwards because it was essentially forgotten about, and that has only recently been rectified. And to be perfectly honest, I'm surprised that they didn't try going for the pensioners' bus pass back then too. Perhaps they would have thought of that if they thought they could get away with it. I was grateful at the time for many pensioners who came to the Royal Square to argue against that, and in that spirit I hope pensioners, after this petition debate, whatever it leads to, whether it leads to a proposition or not, will get more active and advocate for themselves. I think that we need to take a good look at what we can do in the absence of change to the rules on taxation and the state pension, which it feels like there isn't an overwhelming appetite in this Assembly to do, that there are other things we ought to be doing to support pensioners in our society. And so I'm going to say something that you won't hear me say often when I say I agree with Ben Shenton, the chair of Jersey branch of Age Concern, who was quoted in the media not so long ago, offering his suggestions on things that ought to be done to support pensioners in Jersey, bearing in mind this is someone who plays a very prominent role in an organisation that supports pensioners in Jersey. He said we ought to review the general level of pensions and tax thresholds to ensure pensioners can survive without reverting to income support. So I completely agree with that. He spoke of reviewing winter fuel allowance to make it payable regardless of temperature thresholds. He talked about removing GST off food, something that would benefit pensioners. And he talked about developing policies aimed at improving the lives of an ageing demographic. And so I think we can go further than what he said in that article. We ought to look at introducing rent stabilisation measures, something that the successive states' assemblies have voted against, but which would benefit pensioners who, for whatever reason, live in the private rented sector in their retirement. We ought to look at the cliff edge that there is now for some benefits that are provided for pensioners that where they lose that entitlement the moment they pay a penny of tax. That's things like Pensioner Plus, where there's subsidised or further subsidised GP visits as a result of that. There's the community cost bonus and others as well. And I know that the Social Security Minister is doing something to look at this and work out how that cliff edge can be tapered. And that is a progressive measure which would help pensioners and I think represent good value for money. But in the absence of proper consideration of the state pension being made tax exempt because of all of the reasons that the Treasury Minister has outlined, and let's be frank, the huge cost that would come with that, I think it's time that we ought to pay greater focus on Jersey's pensioners. The fact that far too many of them in Jersey live in relative poverty, and government actions over successive years have sought to make that worse, and let's turn that around, and that's Reform Jersey's position, sir.
Deputy Joseph.
Sir, I have a technical issue, but I will seek to look at my screen. So I rise to be in a betwixt and between position I've been in this assembly. I'm going to be 55 next year. I don't know whether that makes me old, but I can only certainly get an over 55 house, or maybe I can get one in St Saviour, because there is a whole series of over 55s. And we may joke at these issues, sir, but we are, of course, dealing with as the Minister has said, and as the advances of this petition have said, we're dealing with a very changed world, and we're trying to catch up with that changed world. But there are some things that we can be proud upon. We can be really proud about our systems in Jersey. And being a non-minister, sir, and being not on any scrutiny panels and being a backbencher, I can be not bound by collective responsibility within government, and I'm not bound by anything. I can just be almost a free agent, and it's quite a liberating experience. And I hope to be positive about what you can do if you really want to. First of all, I would firstly, and this is a great debate, this is an in-committee debate, and I'm not going to speak for ages, but I am going to prod at or point and show the light into a few relevant issues which really matter to the bringers of this petition, to the member that's spoken in favour of this, and actually is still in agreement with the Treasury Minister. We haven't got the Social Security Minister here, who is the guardian of our Social Security Fund in a way that isn't the case in a lot of other jurisdictions. And I know that if she were here, she would be defending her Social Security Fund. In the United Kingdom, there has been a general election, and there has been the bringing into the public consciousness this issue of national insurance, equivalent in Jersey Social Security. And there's been a great deal of hoo-la-la and discussion and debate in the democracy of the United Kingdom about the issue of the apparent Labour governments bringing in the sneaky tax on workers. Well, if we translate that into Jersey, that would be raising the employer contribution on Social Security, which is one of the arguments that the petitioners are advancing, that, hold on a minute, we have paid into this fund, I'll come to the fund and the importance of it in a minute, and we've paid tax about that fund, and so we want, when we get our pension later, we want to get tax off it. I understand why they would say that, but it's worth reminding ourselves of how that fund is in existence and why it's different, and why this Assembly must maintain the absolute integrity. It isn't a pension, so if I may say, the public sector pension, of which you, sir, as a Crown Officer, and others in this, other states' employees will receive, is a fully funded pension scheme. That means there's enough money in it to pay all the future pensions. That's great. Let nobody raid your pension pot, sir, or anybody else's. That would be a Maxwellian. It's like a Maxwellian invasion of using the pension pots. The Social Security Fund is not quite a fully funded scheme. It's a kind of a pay-as-you-go, which is a result of the wise decisions, as the Minister said, and I'm sure the advance of the petitions will also say, the very wise and brave, courageous decisions of President of Social Security of the day, Deputy and then Senator Le Sueur, who raised the contribution levels because he forecast. I remember being in this assembly, sir, when he brought forward those early, slightly increased charges for both employers and employees. No doubt there's a deputy from in this assembly that will have been in the assembly at the time because he will have been around for those debates. We notched up very carefully those social security rates in order to allow a fund which today has got billions of pounds in it, which is ring-fenced, which is the Social Security Reserve Fund. Now that fund is there to pay for those statutory benefits. They're paying the pensions, and then the askers of the petition are saying, hold on, we've paid into this fund, we've paid as employees, our employers have paid, and when there are people that have been guaranteed a pension, even if they've been on a relatively low income, and the taxpayers put that extra money, and that's called the supplementation. It's not really well understood, but taxpayers have made sure that in this fund, which is ring-fenced, which can't be touched unless this assembly changes the rules, that fund is sacrosanct. And it should be sacrosanct, and it shouldn't be tampered with. And we can say to the bringers of this petition, we're going to continue to make sure that we can, and this is one of the few assemblies, sir, that can actually say with evidence and with an actuarial valuation that despite the fact it's not fully funded, it's got a big reserve in which allows the older populations to be able to receive their pensions going forward. When I'm 67 and I get my pension, or maybe I'll be older, if I'm around, hopefully, I will get my pension and I will know it. Hopefully it won't be my only pension, which is, I think, what the issue that the Treasury Minister has. People are absolutely, as quite rightly Deputy Mezek and others have pointed out, the Social Security pension is the baseline. It's almost the living pension, the living wage pension. It should be what you could live on. And so actually we need to, as we merge into modern times, sir, and as we're having a people's proposition, as Deputy Ward has said, because I'm quite happy to not break standing order, sir, but I regard this as a people's proposition, and members can say whether they're for or against this without a vote. But I'm for, not, I'm afraid, what Deputy Ward is saying, but I would have amended the proposition by saying some additional things that what we can do. We need to explain better what is very clearly this issue of marginal relief. And if we haven't explained it, and I've sat where the Constable of Greville is, as the Treasury Minister, battling through endless issues, of which I was apparently responsible for an austerity budget and all this sort of thing. I don't quite understand all that. But from that seat, sir, and from seats in that, when the senators were in here, we had to change our tax system and move with the times. And we not only put more money into the fund, we didn't raise it. When we were faced with deficits, we asked people to pay GST. That's hurting pensioners. Well, or is it? Actually, we made a compensatory allowance to increase tax increases. So they weren't actually, they were insulated. All people who didn't pay tax were insulated when we brought in GST because they got the GST bonus. There's a lot that's forgotten, sir, and there's a lot that's boring, members, but there's a lot that really matters. And in an in-committee debate, you can say them. And it's worth saying and explaining to people who are extremely well-intentioned, as Deputy Ward is, and for the Treasury Minister to say, no, I can't do this. I agree with her. For a member of her coalition government, Deputy Mezek, to say, to say she agrees with not saying to Deputy Ward, no, we can't do anything. Well, we can do something, and we can amend the people's proposition by saying, sorry, we can't give you this additional tax increase because it's going to favour people on higher incomes. People who are on just the social security income, sir, they just get, they won't be paying tax. It's the people on the social security a pension that are in receipt of a social security pension and, dare I say it, a public sector pension. Dare I say it, another pension, dare I say rental income. They will be getting more income, and what the petitioners are asking is that those higher earners that are in receipt of not only their brilliant social security pension, but on top of that, they get all this other income. Now, it's not really right, I don't think, to say that we should give them a tax exemption, I say to Deputy Ward. So if we need to explain to the bringers of this petition that are in receipt of just their social security pension and the fact that they're not paying tax, because the system should mean they're not paying tax if they're just in release of their social security system, that minimum guarantee of income that you get. And if we're not explaining that, then I agree with the Treasury Minister, we need to explain it better, because marginal relief and unfortunately AI and computer technology is going to mean that the old laborious computation that we had to do, which is, okay, what's the lower of the two rates of income? If you've got that income, you pay at the 20% or that income at the marginal rate. And no, it isn't 26% or 26%. It is, as the Treasury Minister says, the effective rate. Now, so I'm afraid to say that I agree with the Treasury Minister that basically making the social security pension tax-free automatically, as is being asked, is not sensible, because it basically means that people with higher earners will basically get a tax-free benefit, which they shouldn't really have, or it's unaffordable to do that. It's not that they shouldn't have it, but it just wouldn't be sensible. And we as policymakers have to use scarce resources that are available from taxpayers. First of all, we have to make the tax system fair, and then we have to make the resources that are paid fairer. I would just say that the petitioners should be equally, I hope, supportive of maintaining the integrity of the Social Security Fund. Their pensions are paid from a fund. Yes, they've got all rights to defend and to demand their pension. If I were them, I would be demanding that their fund is also not UKized, which means that they broke the door between the Social Security Fund and tax receipts. The Social Security Fund is advanced by budget amendments that we're going to listen to in 2 weeks' time, breaks the door open. It breaks the door open about use of that fund. That fund is not there as a self-service buffet for other members. It's there for people's pensions. It's there for people's statutory benefits. It's not there for the minimum wage 20 million. This is very relevant to the debate. If we're going to ensure that we can carry on paying those pensions from that sensible approach, thanks to Deputy and then Senator Lesueur that put the money in the fund in the first place, and then the brilliant investment advisors that I'm so proud of, both Senator Lesueur and I, when we did the Treasury. We've got the Common Investment Fund, and those funds are used brilliantly, sir. They're used by independent investors, and by goodness me, that fund that's got billions of pounds in has grown beautifully, independently, by brilliant investment advice. And that's where there should be confidence. We've not only got a fund because they haven't broken down the door and stolen the money like the UK did. National insurance doesn't exist, it's general taxation. We don't here. We have a ring-fence fund that's almost, it's not quite as fully funded, but it's a pay-as-you-go with a big buffer. Now, there's been discussions about what pension funds should be used for and what they shouldn't. They should be used just for those future pensions and those statutory obligations. So when we have this in committee debate, and when we discuss that fund, I hope that Deputy Balash is going to rise and be successful in saying, no, Do not use that fund for something that it's not the purpose for, because that means we're going to erode the future value of the fund. I will advance a similar proposition, say no. No to the government building and the paying of rent. That's a conflict of interest. We can debate that in the budget, but it's very relevant. If we want to give people benefit and certainty of the future, then we must make sure that they're going to get their pension and we're going to tax it fairly, which is what the petitioners want. And so I say to the petitioners, I'm going to stand in the Assembly for as long as I'm here, and I'm going to defend their fund. I'm going to make sure that those tax allowances, and if those tax allowance needs to be changed, then we should look at them. But I don't think that they need to be probably changed. I think we need to explain them better. And I say that very respectfully to those pensioners. Because if they're only on a social security pension and they think they're paying 27% tax, then there's something going wrong. And I think and I agree with the Treasury Minister, so there have been some problems with the tax and ITIS and all the rest of it, but I'm sure we can fix it. But they won't be paying that. They shouldn't be paying tax if they're just in their social security pension. I think I'm confident in saying that. Thank you, and I'm grateful for the Treasury Minister to say so. We must make sure that the fund isn't used for any other purpose. Members think I'm making a point that isn't valid, but it's absolutely vital. The fund is there to pay these pensions because of prudent investment advice from the Common Investment Fund. It's not there as a self-service buffet to invest in the 230 new market or buying something or a trinket or whatever. It's there for proper investments and must be used so. It's not there for £30 million worth of living wage, which has got nothing to do with the fund. Sorry. Now, what else can we do? Deputy Mezek spoke about austerity and all the rest of it. Well, if he wants to actually, like me, help pensioners and like my constable, and I absolutely, I've seen also people at the till without being able to make their credit card pay. 3 days ago, I was in a supermarket when there was a new member of staff at the supermarket, and a few days before, somebody wasn't able to pay their bill. And I just paid it because I thought the person was just having a problem with their bank. And of course, I paid it. Doesn't mean to say I'm an angel or anything. I know the constable would do it. But I know this person just had a problem and they repaid me within 2 days. That's the right thing to do. And I don't want any thanks for that because there was three other people in the queue to do it. But the young man behind the till, I said, you're a new member of staff. I haven't met you before. And he said to me that actually he was working because he couldn't continue in his job, in his family job with his father, because they've been building flats which they can't sell. So he's now having to go out to work. So what can we do about the problems that pensioners have about affordability of housing? Now, I'm afraid we can't go on doing what we did, and we had a debate about it yesterday. Pensioners who are in social rented housing are being well accommodated now, thanks to Andium, and now the separation of Andium. We've got brilliant accommodation for pensioners living in Andium homes and in the Jersey Homes Trust, and there are thousands of pensioners that are living in private sector rental homes as well. And of course, there's pensioners with their own homes as well. So what can we do about that? Well, for the renters, we need as much emphasis on creating more social rented homes with good quality homes. We need more private sector rentals, and we need to have downsizing opportunities for pensioners who are living in too big homes and create incentives. The Guernsey Assembly discussed last week their budget. Well, they've got some problems because they put off GST, but they've got a relief on stamp duty, which encourages pensioners, people of older age, to downsize in their homes. I don't want to force people out of their homes. I want to encourage them to think about how they can lower their costs of living and have another home. Maybe it's going to be one in St Saviour in some of the things that we could do. And I'm not winding my constable up either, but we've got some really good existing accommodation. So I'm not going to speak for very much longer, but I want to make 3 more points. The way that we can really respond to these petitioners, and this is a debating assembly, we're a democracy, we can agree to differ respectfully, and we can agree to differ and say, hold on, there's a third way. There's an additional way and a better way to deal with this. And what I would say to Deputy Ward is, and I say to my constable, I would say, let's have a discussion, not a lengthy in-committee debate, about not just simply making it tax-free pensions, but making a concerted effort in the rest of this Assembly's period by driving down the cost of living that those pensioners are having to live with. That's what's going to make a real difference. And this is where I differ from the Reform Party. I believe in growing the cake. I believe in private enterprise, and that means competition, and that means private enterprise, business driving down the cost of living. Have we got a low-cost supermarket for our pensioners, or ourselves, or young people? No, we haven't. We haven't. When I started in this assembly in 1999, there was a freight company that wouldn't allow me to bring agricultural goods on a vessel because we had no anti-competitive behaviour positions. I don't want to go back in the past, but I'm well familiar with anti-competitive behaviour. Why is it that we can't have an Aldi, a Lidl, or a low-cost supermarket in Jersey? Why is it? That's going to drive the cost of living. When I was in London and I was comparing the cost of living of Jersey versus in a local store, whether that be Morrison's, the Co-op, or those other retailers, I did a shop for a single person, which I now am, versus a family, and the price was 40% difference, sir. Freight rates aren't going to explain that away. The Economic Development Minister, the Sustainable Economic Development Minister, is going to bring us up to date on what he's trying to do to make a competitive freight service. It's tough, it's hard, it's difficult, he's getting criticised, he's getting undermined. But we must stick, if I believe him, and I do, he's wanting competition on our freight routes. I want lorries on that freight boat that's going to be coming to Jersey next year, whichever company it is. I want them with Aldi or Lidl supermarkets in them, and I want a low-cost supermarket. I want to see this Assembly increasing the supply of homes to drive down rental prices. I want to get the housing market moving so that downsizing can actually downsize, because currently the market's stuck. So maybe members think I've spoken too long, but I've raised some points where I'm going to sit down, sir, and I'm going to say that I agree this is an in-committee debate. If nobody else is going to speak, I will give some members some ideas of what they can speak about. They can speak about lowering the cost of groceries, lowering the cost of living, lowering the cost of rents, maintaining the integrity of the Social Security Fund. We're raising the level of debate. This is a good debate. I welcome the petitioner's opportunity to speak. I welcome this opportunity of an in-committee debate because members of the public can hear what we think. And I hope in my few observations, members are very, very clear on what I think. I say, I'm sorry, petitioners, that isn't quite the right way, but I think we've got a better way of helping you, a better way of explaining, and we're going to drive down the cost of livings. And I thank members for their attention.
Deputy, you've mentioned about length of speeches, and of course there are no restrictions on the length of speeches. You're perfectly entitled to speak for as long as you want in an in-committee debate. And equally, I accept that the ambit of what people are going to say is likely to run moderately wide, because one is talking about the interests of pensioners, and the in-committee debate topic can be seen as within that. But we do have to, I believe, to do justice to the petitioner's request, focus on the maintenance or abolition of taxation on pensions for pensioners. It may be that if one is entirely broad in one's approach to this topic, then a number of people who otherwise might wish to speak specifically on the subject of the topic will not have the opportunity of doing so. I merely make that point for consideration by members. Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. And that is duly noted. I too want to join other members in thanking those who joined the petition to bring us here today to discuss this important issue. And it's a well-made argument. I think it's a principled position to take, and I fully understand the concerns of those who have joined the petition. I just wanted to, at the fear of being a little bit repetitive, although I try not to be so, just outline some of the points which make it difficult, which is why I couldn't, to be clear, I couldn't support what's asked for in the proposition. And I understand the principle the tax, of at least an element of what is paid as being double taxation. I understand that. But I also understand that you have to balance that with thresholds and other relative arguments against. So what is a statistic? Is that 26% of our pensioners are on relative low income? That's higher than the UK, and that is a statistic we shouldn't be content with. And that's the statistic I think we should be aiming to reduce, because one of the byproducts of looking at reducing taxation on pensioners is not that not all pensioners are in that category. There are some pensioners who are financially comfortable. There are some pensioners that are well off. So we want to make sure any assistance we give is aimed at those not so well off. And I know that doesn't quite deal with the principle of the argument, but I think that's where I would support we point our efforts into the future, and that's something that this government is trying to achieve. I am very aware and very pleased with the work that the team at Social Security are doing now with the new minister and the team making some real differences and already starting to make a decision, sir, that are helping people on lower incomes right now, sir, and we need to continue to build upon that. We've already heard that contributions to the Social Security Fund make up one element, just one element of the total income of the fund, sir. There are also contributions from employers and the annual grant from tax-funded revenues, with contributions from employees representing around 45% of the total contributions. The grant has an annual value of around 90 million, and an ongoing reduction of over 20 million a year in perpetuity would have a serious long-term consequence for the fund. So these are very real issues, which other members have explained, which means this is not the way, I think, to help those less off, those less well off in our society, albeit those it could address some of the argument in relation to how contributions are paid. So I too declare an interest. I am a member of the Committee of Age Concern and are perhaps very aware of the challenges that some senior citizens are facing. And I am committed, as I believe this government are, to addressing those challenges, helping those less well off to be better well off, better equipped to deal with the financial challenges that we face in a modern society. Just to be clear, sir, I thank again those who have brought the proposition. It's a debate worth having. Albeit we can't vote on it, I think that's something the chair of PPC and the PPC committee are going to be looking at. I think it's important, though, in the lack of a vote, that when they do speak, put their position forward, because it will help those watching members understand what the position of the Assembly is. And I believe, from what I've heard, that members couldn't support, by way of majority, a proposition to remove tax. But I hope members are collectively aligned in finding a way to better help those less well off, sir. Thank you.
Very much. Mr. Conor St Martin.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I thank the petitioner and all those who have signed the petition. And so I'm by no means an expert on pensions, but in the light of this in-committee debate, it is my understanding that under the Social Security law, a person ceases to pay primary contributions the month after you start receiving your pension, which would seem to create a direct correlation between employee taxable contributions and the funding of their pension. And I would appreciate the Minister clarifying the suggestion that the employee employment does not fund their pension, which is rather misleading. To me, to say that pensioners receive an allowance each year to reduce the double taxation is also misleading, as everyone is entitled to a tax allowance regardless of their age and type of income they receive. When compared to other jurisdictions, the Jersey pension rules are not very generous, and that it currently takes 47 years worth of contributions.
If I could ask, because I don't think we're core 8, we have 2 online, and we no longer have sufficient number within the Assembly to continue. Asher, would you please ask members who are in the coffee room to return? Yes. Would you perhaps let's use the electronic voting system. We will indicate who's here and who's not. Members may return to their seat, but I open the voting for the purposes of indicating presence in the chamber. Well, as if by magic we've become quorate. Therefore, Colin Tarbell, would you like to continue? Thank you.
Restart or?
That's a matter for you. We went in, we were quorate until literally 15 seconds before I asked you to.
Right, sorry. Yes, I know that some people do find tax boring, and I'm sorry if I made you all leave the assembly. I'll just start quickly. I'm not an expert on pensions, but in the light of this in-committee debate, it is my understanding that under the Social Security law, a person ceases to pay primary contributions the month after you start receiving your pension, which would seem to create a direct correlation between employee taxable contributions and the funding of their pension. And I'd appreciate the Minister clarifying the suggestion that the employee employment does not fund their pension, which is, to me, rather misleading. For me, to say that pensioners receive an allowance each year to reduce the double taxation is also misleading, as everyone is entitled to a tax allowance, regardless of their age and type of income they receive. When compared to other jurisdictions, the Jersey pension rules are not very generous, and that it currently takes 47 years' worth of contributions to receive a full pension. In the UK, it's only 35. This is a 12-year difference, which is a substantial difference. So contributions do not go as far, and on an island with a very high cost of living, especially for those on a fixed income, they pay more, and then are taxed again on what they have already been taxed on. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I really just rise to make a few points without making a serious speech here. The bit which I struggle with here is, and the Treasury Minister has caused me some irritation, and I apologise if she didn't clarify this point, but comparing two incomes, two family incomes, okay, of family A and family B living next door to each other, I think she turned around and said, well, if they're both on the same income level, they won't pay the same tax because one is retired and one isn't. I'm just concerned that actually sort of, it's confusing, because just because you're retired and your income is coming in, so you've already paid tax on that income. So inevitably you will pay less tax if you're the retired family than you are a working family. So I just feel that that's quite a confusing statement. I hate to use the word sanctimonious, but I seem to recall when I was housing minister that, and when I made the comment that some of the poorest people in our society own their own homes, I was very much told off significantly by members of Reform, because saying that's not the case, because they're perfectly able to sell their home and raise the income required and have a better quality of life. That sounds like let's force people to sell their homes comments. I just find that a bit irritating. The point about its interesting point about living wages and living pensions. We don't hear much about living pensions. It was mentioned here earlier, talking about that. I was just trying to do some quick maths on this. We're going to be moving living wage to, I think it's about £14 an hour, I think, next year if this goes through. My maths, very quick maths on that, that means that someone on a living wage is considered to be earning around about £25,500, and yet we're talking about a pension which is tax-free at 20. So for me, is there an opportunity here to align what we define as a living pension in line with a living wage, a living income? There seems to be a bit of drift, a bit of a gap between those points. And I think that pretty much covers all the points I had in mind. I'm absolutely in agreement with the idea, the concept of trying to reduce costs, so people moving from to right size. A Jersey Development Company are putting things together around stamp duty relief and those kind of areas. Absolutely, that will encourage movement. And I'm not saying people should move, but these are good opportunities to do that. But yeah, those are the points which, for me, have come out of this debate so far. Thank you.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak in this debate? Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. And I raised very... I apologise. I raised very briefly to speak, not really about the content so much of the petition, but rather around communication issues, because it seems to me that the communication around tax and pensions that we deliver to citizens is simply not good enough. We've seen numerous letters to the Jersey Evening Post. We have seen messages on social media which clearly show that in some quarters there is a lack of understanding. It's an issue that the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel raised around independent taxation. And I think we made a recommendation that perhaps the Income Tax Department should seek some professional support about messaging and communication in this topic. Every taxpayer should be able to understand why they pay the tax they do, how it is calculated, what is standard relief, what is marginal relief. And I think there is a lesson here for the Tax Department and the Social Security Department. Just in the preceding few minutes, I've actually had a look at the material on the gov.je about calculations. We heard earlier from the Treasury Minister that this 20 to 26% tax rate isn't a tax rate, it's actually a relief rate. That's not what it says on the gov.je site. It says tax at 26%. She's talked about notional net income at 26%. The messaging around what is actually a fundamental obligation for citizens on this island, it is really not clear. So my contribution to this debate, I completely agree with everything that has been said. We do need to support pensioners, but actually we need to support everybody on a low income. And not all pensioners are on a low income. We have a lot of working families that are on low income. But I think it is incumbent on us as a government, as an assembly, to encourage the Treasury Minister to get the communications right.
I have no one else listed to speak, so Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. If I may respond to some of those points that have just been made, and indeed to try to make some other observations of my own. I think we need to consider what is the actual concern or purpose of this proposal. Is it to support low-income pensioners? Because if it is, it fails completely. It does nothing to help the vast majority of low-income pensioners who do not already pay tax. Exempting the Social Security pension from tax, our pension at the full rate is about £14,000. And I hear the Constable of St Martin's comments about the length of time. That is the way our pension system was developed many decades ago. To change that would have a significant cost, but our pension is £14,000. That is bigger than Guernsey, it's bigger than the UK. Our tax allowance at £20,000 is bigger than almost any other jurisdiction we've been able to identify. So a pensioner could have the Social Security pension plus £6,000 of income and not pay any tax. So this does not help low-income pensioners. I accept that I am straying into the territory of the Social Security Minister, but I was Social Security Minister for a time, and I would just like to emphasise that there is support available for low-income pensioners from government. We have income support. A person who is only on pension, the state's pension, may qualify for income support. That applies even if you own your own home. If you have a low income, you can go to CLS and ask about income support. There may be help with rental costs. The Pensioner Plus benefit, which helps people with optician, chiropody and dental costs. If you're on income support, you can have the Health Access Scheme, which offers very much reduced GP visits. There's a cold weather bonus. There may be others that I've forgotten. And I'm sure if the Social Security Minister was here, she would be saying, as I'm going to say now, that if there are pensioners out there who are struggling to make ends meet, I strongly suggest that they go and speak to Customer and Local Services in Lamont Street to make sure that they are receiving all benefits to which they're entitled. Exempting the pension from tax will do nothing to benefit the worst off, but it will give a benefit to the wealthy, and that simply cannot be right. We must support, we must target the money we spend. I'm not quite sure that I recognise the Constable St Martin's concerns that if someone stops paying contributions on retirement. To me, it makes complete sense that once you've paid your contributions and you have your pension, why would you still be paying in when you're receiving money? That just doesn't make any sense at all. Once you receive your pension, I believe you do not pay contributions. So why would you pay contributions when you're receiving your pension? I believe the employer may still pay, and that's, again, the employer is still contributing, but the individual stops paying contributions at retirement, and that to me makes complete sense. I'm sorry if Deputy Ward was offended by my attempt to try and contrast households, but what I was trying to say, that by exempting the pension from tax, we could end up in a situation where we have two households living next to each other who both have the same income, but one family is paying significantly less tax for no other reason than they're pensioners, while another family who are young, who may be trying to start their own family, who may have a mortgage, when they are paying more tax, when the pensioner household is more likely to be owning their own house and have lower income. So it is that disparity that by giving people an age-related benefit, you prejudice younger people, and we have got to consider the interests of younger people in the island. We want them to stay here, and if they are paying more money to support pensioners who don't need it, who already have significant incomes, then that is not fair. And I was trying to explain clearly badly. It's set out in the report and the papers have been circulated what those contrasts would be between pensioner households and non-pensioner households if this proposition was passed. It is simply not fair to younger people to exempt pensioners and give people a benefit that's not available to everybody. I agree, as I said in my earlier speech, we clearly do need to look at how we communicate this. And as I said earlier, the way it's described, as the controller said to me, we are perhaps a victim of trying to use plain English. We have tried to explain it in a way that people understand and have clearly got it wrong. So we will go back to the drawing board on that and try to make it clearer how it works. It is undeniably complicated, but I can only come back to the same thing again. Nobody pays more than 20% of their total income in this island. Long-term care is a different thing, but income tax, and this is what we're talking about, we're not talking about anything else, income tax, nobody pays more than 20% of their total income. So, sir, I just wanted to pick up on those points. And
I know this is an in-committee debate, and it is a debate, sir, and you ruled that, I think you ruled that the other things couldn't be taken, but people can speak more than once. And I just wondered if the Treasury Minister did take on board anything as a member of the government in relation to the issues of how to deal with the underlying problem of why the petitioners want a tax break. And I don't think the Minister responded to any of the issues apart from agreeing with me about the not way. If I've spoken for no purpose, I wanted to say there is ways we can help pensioners.
Well, no, I mean, there's an order. If you wish to log your interest in making another speech, you're more than welcome to, Deputy, and I'll note you down as wishing that. But I have other people who have not yet spoken who wish to speak. Do you wish to log you
I
for?
thought we were just wrapping up, sir, where the Minister was going to make the final...
No, the Minister
right,
is
okay.
just insert and
I
can insert a
apologise.
third or fourth speech if necessary. I mean, towards the end of the debate. So I'll log you as wishing to speak again. Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I thank the GREF again for enabling the online participation. I might not spread bugs to people then, so we might all be a bit healthier. So it's been a very interesting debate to listen to. There are a few really key points, and I thank Deputy Mezek for making the point about what we do, our intentions in Reform Jersey have always been to supporting particularly low-income pensioners. And I think there is a really key point to be made here. And looking at both the comments papers, the reports, I suppose there are for this, rather than the comments paper, the effect of making this change. Currently, pensioners earning £50,000, I believe, from the paper, have a tax liability of £2,600. So their incomes from their pension or additional income would mean that that's the liability that they have. So the problem with this change for me is it will not affect those on a low income, those on £20,000, £30,000 or £40,000. There will be no change for those pensioners if that's what their pension income is. And so therefore, this is not targeted towards those with low incomes. It is more beneficial for those with higher pension incomes. Now, you know, I would love, I hope one day I would have a decent pension income. I haven't quite worked it out yet, and it probably may not be the case. But if so, I would expect to pay my share of tax at that time as well. It was very interesting to hear Deputy Barbara Ward talk about changes to our tax system. And perhaps our income tax system could be improved by removing the 20 calculation and allowing all taxpayers to claim tax allowances. This will enable us to reduce the marginal rate from 26 to 25%, providing a tax cut for middle earners, those pensioners that are sort of on the cusp of this tax payment, for example, whilst asking highest earners to contribute more, which is a fairer taxation system. And the majority of taxpayers will be better off under these proposals. That is directly from the Reform Jersey Manifesto and was brought to the Assembly on the 14th of the 12th, 2023, and it was voted against by some of the people who have talked about a fairer taxation system. So I think perhaps it's time for us to reconsider that, and perhaps members would like to come and talk to us and meet us in our Monday meeting and come and have a conversation about tax and the best way to work that. You're more than welcome to come and have that dialogue. I think it'll be a really interesting one. At the same time, sir, if we remove the cap on social security contributions, that will provide extra revenue, which we could direct to any area that we wanted in social security and improve the lot for pensioners. I'm also aware that I noticed the social security minister, who is ill today, is looking to extend pensioner benefits, and one of the key things he's looking to do is to remove the cliff edges that exist, because there are some problems whereby if you earn suddenly over a certain amount, you lose your right to certain assistance from the state as a pensioner. And I think there are ways in which we can improve that to make that move gentler and give more support where it's needed and targeted support. I'd also say, sir, that that we have made changes. If you are fortunate enough to be able to have homes to rent out to people, or even a room to rent out, you do receive tax relief on that rent a room. Something that is very only really for those who have that opportunity to do that. And so there have been changes to our tax system which may have benefited those who have space in their homes to rent out. So I think we need to be very cognizant and very thoughtful about what we're discussing here. I thank the people who brought the petition and signed, because it started this dialogue and it started this conversation. And if we can start this conversation to look wider about what it actually means in terms of incomes for pensioners and those lowest incomes and what we can do to help those lowest incomes, Also, to look at our taxation system to make it fairer, more equitable, more meaningful for us, and thus produce more support for our pensioners, then that can be a really good thing from this in-committee debate. So I thank members for speaking, and I hope that's some form of contribution. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Otif raised a fair point that this petition may be easy to argue against on technical grounds, but its support is an indication of a concern that its wording obscures. Relative low income in Jersey is where a Jersey household earns less than 60% of the lower half of all household incomes in Jersey. 28% of Jersey pensioner households are in relative low income. That compares with 18% of UK pension households. Meanwhile, the cost of living in Jersey keeps rising. Deputy Otif mentioned a situation where pensioners in receipt of pension income on top of their state's pension could be struggling to make ends meet. Deputy Masek has referred to Ben Shenton's proposals. Early on in my term as a States member, I did a lot of work trying to help pensioners who are paying tax on a relatively low amount of income. I highlighted an inequity regarding the payment of social security benefits to pensioners in the form of Pension Plus that fails to recognise how those paying rent can have far less in the way of disposable income than homeowners. There has been a change of Social Security Minister since then, which may have delayed the review, along with the attention that is being given to her intended increase of the living wage, which of course could help some working pensioners. I also have explored the proposition of having an increased income tax threshold for pensioners. Like extra states pension, this isn't regarded as an efficient way of helping pensioners who need help, as it diverts money away from pensioners who need financial help towards those who don't. We always arrive back in the position that targeted income support is fairer. And I think that much attention needs to be in the form of a concern about the way it is perceived amongst pensioners and branded. I would prefer some sort of rebranding to talk about supplementary pension. I agree with Philip Otif, or with Deputy Otif, that anything that pushes up the cost of living has an impact on people in this situation. And this needs to be borne in mind whether we are talking about ferry contracts or otherwise. With respect to his desire for cheaper supermarkets, we need to be aware of the models used by such supermarkets and that economies of scale may not work for a small island such as Jersey that can work elsewhere. It all comes down to numbers. I very much will encourage the Social Security Minister to carry on and to accelerate the work that she's doing with respect to cliff edges, but also to do more in terms of encouraging state pensioners who need that help to overcome pride or concern about the availability of income support. And I very much hope States members will join me in taking away any perceived stigma in this. I hope that, given that this does come down to numbers, that when States members debate the budget, they will consider the need for demonstration of value for money before seeking to divert money away from measures that could support those in need. I hope they will ask themselves, why have we seen no real growth in the economy outside the financial services sector, despite the productivity support given so far? Only by changing our own focus and value on such matters can the position change with respect to cost of living and the ability to afford to live in Jersey. Only in this way can we better support our own community.
Deputy Jubilee.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow the previous speaker who mentioned some data that other speakers have also raised around the percentages of pensioners who are living in relative low income. And I used data from that same piece of research in a question that I asked the Chief Minister recently, which focused on single parent families and how similarly those types of families have a very high proportion living in relative low income. And just some general thoughts that I have gathered, and I believe that other members have as well, that yes, this issue has been raised around tax, but it's very clear that our main concerns that seem to be shared are the cost of living for those pensioners on relative low income. So I hope that the government have listened to that, and the previous speaker mentioned some new solutions, and also the Treasury Minister spoke about lots of help that is available. And I think that pensioners are, it's taken seriously. I do think that's something, in my time in the States Assembly, concern for pensioners and that understanding that they're on a fixed income and should have some special thinking applied to them, because unlike the working age population, they are not as able to increase their income. But I do think there's probably more that we can do. And I want to go back to stats, sir, because I always like to use an evidence-based approach, and I'm not sure that we are using the stats that we have well enough. I think sometimes there's the work that Jersey Statistics are doing is at very high quality, and I'm not sure that we pay enough attention to it and actually use it enough to inform our policies, because those stats are telling us that there are higher percentages of our population in certain demographics living in relative low income, which of course means relative poverty. I don't think we should shy away from using that word. It's not absolute poverty, but it is relative poverty. And that's the reality for many pensioners on our island, and it shouldn't be. I think that's something that we can all declare today, that there should not be pensioners living in poverty on our island. And so I want to further dig down into groups within that pensioner demographic who may be suffering even more. And women are particularly financially vulnerable in the pensioner demographic for various reasons. And I have a draft question which I'm going to be asking to draw out some statistics on this, because various reasons, pensions being received by a living spouse, which might be shared with a female spouse, that pension doesn't always continue if the male spouse dies. That's something that a fellow member raised with me recently. I wasn't aware that that kind of thing happened. In cases of divorce, pensions are not always considered, and women can be left without any pension income, any private pension income in old age, whereas they may have contributed to that during the marriage. So we do see that women in their old age can be left in greater financial difficulties, and that's something that I would like to see data on, and I would like to see being considered. Other demographics within that pensioner group, single adult households, so either men or women, and I know that food banks are used by single male households. That's one of the largest groups accessing food banks, and there's data on that somewhere as well. I would really like to see somebody bringing all this data together and analysing it, and then taking some action from it. So my message really to government is, and my question is, something new is needed, and we've heard a list of things that are currently on offer, and I think one or two things around the cliff edges that Deputy Scott mentioned. I would like to actually see this collated and brought together. I know there is a cost of living ministerial group, which I've already requested that they do some work on single parent families. I actually think that that should be alongside pensioner families. So my request to the government is, could we actually have something in writing? And it doesn't have to be lengthy. It could just be a 1 or 2 page report, something that the Assembly or the public can actually see. This is the research, and this is what we are planning on doing about it. And perhaps some future actions that could be worked towards by future governments, because this is not an easy thing to solve overnight, as it does require some long-term action. So that's something, that's my request to government. I don't know if there are any government members in here, one or two, so I would like to hear a response on that, please.
Does any other member wish to speak in this debate? If no other member wishes to speak, Deputy Garth.
Thank you, sir. And I will be short following this speech of Deputy Dublé and reflecting on the other speeches that were here. But I will start to thank you for the proposal, Deputy Barbara Ward, bringing this for the debate, because I think it's a really, really important issue to debate. Couple things that I picked up. And when I was walking around and meeting my parishioners, one of the themes that I don't think was really raised here, it's about pensioners who are cash poor but property rich. And this is something that must be addressed along the lines with things that was raised by Deputy Mazik, by Deputy Dublé, by Deputy Scott. Lots of members raised items, things that are making our pensioners feel this grievance. They make our pensioners feel sometimes to be forgotten. They feel that we are putting more emphasis on other ages, group ages of the society, and not to the pensioners. And this was one of the things why it was important for me to actually bring into the common strategic policy my amendment, specifically concentrating on elderly, because originally common strategic policy didn't even had a single word elderly or pensioners in the common strategic policy. Now we do have it, and this is why it's important to look in holistically where we can help, because we must help. The feeling is there. Which way? It's a good point, and we need to discuss, and I would welcome government bringing some options to support pensioners. What's also very clear, that is very, very difficult when we speak about tax, and I spoke about tax with several people, including some of the states members who are not in day-to-day dealing with tax matters, and obviously as a chair of PC I do deal with the tax matters, and speaking with the parishioners and even members of the family. And what I found out actually, when we said 20 means 20, it's very right line, but 20 means 20, it means that if you are paying 26, what we call marginal rate, you always will pay less tax than 20 means 20. And this is the matter of truth. It's very complex maths, and anyone who is paying marginal rates, and it's about the communication, what's written on your paper, because anyone who paying what we call marginal 26, not paying more, between 4 to 19%. The moment it's hit 20%, it's going to 20 means 20. It's very difficult to explain. It's very difficult to drill down. And as Deputy Barbara Watt said, when we pay in social security, it includes so many things that separate what's going to health and what's going to income support and what's going to different other support that getting through. It's really complex. Why our system is so complex? Can we make system less confusing? And I think this is, I spoke also directly with the Treasury Minister and said, maybe we need to get really clear communication, and if communication doesn't work, to simplify the system, because I completely understand the sentiment. You see 26%, this is the first thing that is coming. Some people paying 28% because this didn't pay it, and you need to sit down and actually break it into the maths. But why I raised this is several things that I picked up. But cash poor, assets rich, it's something that needs to be looked at, because these people are really being stopped to access anything within the income support if they have a property. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on this debate? No member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Ward to sum up.
Thank you, sir. Bear with me about summing up. But first of all, can I just say a huge thank you to members for standing and speaking. And also it's about bringing different views, different aspects. It's opened up the debate about the older person, which, you know, we're all going to face that at some point. We're pushing everything into the younger person, but we must remember that part of our society, or important part of society, that has brought us to where we are, to the life that we enjoy, is by the older person, and we should not forget them. The thing that actually has come through is about the communication to everybody when you get that tax form and how it's applied. And I look forward to the Treasury Minister and the Control of Income Tax and their department to really have a look and see how we can improve that. And I think that's a positive that has come out of this debate. I thank the Conitab of St Saviour for saying if we had a proposition, he would support me. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm pleased from the Minister, Deputy Mezek, about that support, about working with Ben Shenton and the older persons. And I think we should take on board and maybe have some dialogue to actually sit down and see if we can actually work something out, taking on those things that can help the aged. I think we need to work on that. And I'd welcome a seat on that committee, if I may. The People's Proposition, it would be lovely if we could have, through the discussions with the States Gref and with PPC, that we could have that for consideration. Because 5,000 votes is a lot of votes out of our population, of the over 18s. And it would be wonderful to actually give people their voice. We want to be transparent, we want to be open, and we want to engage with our islanders. And this is a really good area that we can actually do that via a People's Proposition. So I await guidance on that, sir. I think that, because I don't want us to be here for too long, and I think I've summarised it as best I can, sir. But a huge thank you to, if I may, through the chair, to Paul and to Alan, who I know feel very passionate about this. I know we're not meant to discuss that, but I want to say thank you anyway. So
no, I'm afraid one really shouldn't be playing to the to the public gallery.
I apologise, sir. I apologise. But I think that is it, and thank you very much indeed. We've opened up something which hopefully we can build on. Thank you very much, members.
That concludes the in-committee debate. The one item of business which we have left is the statement to be issued by Deputy Moreau. I understand it has come through electronically. I don't know if we have it in hard copy. I would like it in hard copy because I'll use it to note it.
So,
Deputy Morell is not yet in the chamber. I see him
I think
outside.
Deputy Morell, sir, is about to into the chamber, sir, to
He
make the
is,
statement.
indeed.
But I wonder if...
as if by magic.
Thank you, sir.
Has everyone access to the statement on their machines? No, a number do not yet have that. Can I... Right, it's literally just this second been sent. I'm afraid I don't have access to it at this point.
Would a very short recess be permissible, sir?
Yes. I think, given that we've made excellent time in this morning's work, can I make the suggestion to States members that we adjourn for perhaps 10 minutes and return afterwards? I'm having a nod or no, I'm having shakes of heads. So does anyone wish to make that proposition? To adjourn, sir. For 10 minutes.
To a proposition to adjourn for 15 minutes, sir.
For 15 minutes, is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak upon that? Those in favour of adjourning for 15 minutes kindly show. Those against? Very well, we stand adjourned for 15 minutes. We shall be back in at about 1:45. It's all right, we can leave that. Yes.